Something is breaking beneath the surface of the American economy. It isn't a single crash, but the slow fragmentation of systems holding us together. The grid is straining under a load it cannot verify. PJM interconnections serve 67 million people across 13 states. In December 2025, for the first time in its history, PJM fell short of its own reliability requirement. The capacity auction cleared with a shortfall of 6,623 megawatts, enough to power 6.5 million homes. Nearly all of that projected demand comes from a single source, data centers. By 2037, utilities in this footprint forecast a 100 gigawatt increase in load. That is the equivalent of adding the entire power demand of Spain to a grid already stretched to its limit. This massive physical expansion relies on a dangerously fragile supply chain. A single Taiwanese company, TSMC, fabricates nearly every leading AI chip in existence. Most corporate boards are not yet ready to discuss the concentration risk this creates. The Stanford AI Index reveals a field scaling faster than the systems around it can adapt. Our most critical infrastructure is hitting physical and ecological limits, triggering a systemic breakdown. In January 2026, PJM lowered its near-term load forecast. This didn't happen because demand slowed, but because a significant portion of that energy demand only exists on paper. This is phantom load. Developers submit identical interconnection requests across multiple utility queues. The result is a system clogged with demand that exists in spreadsheets, but not in reality, leaving operators unable to verify what is actually real. This expansion is happening in a vacuum of trust. While the systems we built were designed to infer and model data, but they lack the architecture to ask for ground truth. They extract information without ever seeking consent or witnessing the reality of the people living on the grid. We have engineered a network that scales blindly, operating on models that are increasingly disconnected from the communities they serve. 8,000 years ago, a village formed where the Kivchak River meets Lake Iliamna in Alaska. They called it Igugig, like a throat that swallows water. When a fuel crisis threatened survival, they had to choose a new path for their energy. They gathered to make decisions based on 100% consensus. They chose a solution rooted in indigeneity, a deep intergenerational relationship to their specific geography. They implemented hydrokinetic power, electricity generated by the natural flow of the river. They designed the turbines to protect the salmon migrations that sustained their culture for millennia. The system honors the water instead of just exploiting it. Igiyugig demonstrates that infrastructure resilience begins by re-anchoring energy systems to the people and the land, treating geography as a relationship rather than a data point. The rest of the national grid has lost this anchor. However, the capital required to rebuild it is already sitting on current balance sheets, trapped in reactive, defensive spending. By late 2025, U.S. household debt reached $18.8 trillion. Credit delinquency rates hit their absolute highest level since 2017. These numbers represent millions of households crossing survival thresholds that no ledger records. This massive debt cascades directly into our most critical institutions. The federal uncompensated care pool for hospitals has climbed to $7.7 billion, a full 35% increase in a single year. This is defensive capital, money budgeted for problems that entities cannot solve alone. It includes billions in utility bad debt and federal energy assistance programs that only ever address the symptoms of distress. We are paralyzed by the wrong pockets problem. Utilities, hospitals, and tech companies all spend millions managing the same distressed household, but they do it in fragmented silos. No one wants to subsidize the other, so the system continues to bleed. Billions are exhausted in these silos every year. The threat to our stability is this lack of coordination, keeping capital trapped in reactive cycles. We replace inference with a protocol designed to query the bad debt ledger for ground truth. This creates a coordination layer between those fragmented pools of capital. Through the social helix protocol, a person attests their truth to an anonymized node, generating risk-adjusted outputs without surveillance. A fractional allocation engine then pools microfractions of capital from utilities, hospitals, and hyperscalers. They split the cost geographically, each receiving a complete systemic return. At scale, The math is staggering. Closing the survival gap for 100,000 households costs $25 million. This intervention avoids $900 million in cascading systemic losses. The 36-to-1 return on investment is a direct result of moving from reactive collections to proactive coordination. As AI drives the cost of algorithmic productivity towards zero, it leaves a massive void in our traditional labor markets. The coordination layer fills this gap through a purpose ledger. This framework witnesses and compensates the human acts that algorithms cannot perform: care, ecological stewardship, and the attestation of truth. The internet connected computers, and the web connected information. This next layer connects value to its geographic point of origin, stabilizing the households and infrastructure that sustain the global market. IGUGIG operates on 100% consensus, understanding that a community rises together or not at all. With a 36-to-1 return on the table, we have the arithmetic to stop inferring and start listening to the reality of the ground we already stand on.